Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Dr. Shaily and today we are going to start another series on history of English literature. In this video, we are going to discuss the very first age, that is Anglo-Saxon age, which starts from 450 AD to 1066 AD. I have covered all the important facts, don't worry. It is specially designed for the students of NEP, BA second semester. It is going to cover all the important topics that are going to come in your exams. And in this video, you are going to find very easy notes and we are going to discuss this age in three parts. First, we will discuss the characteristics of the age and literary features of the age, which means what were the literary techniques and what was the literary forms that the Anglo-Saxons followed. And the third part would be the important works which were produced during that age. But before that, we need to understand the history of England and who were the English people and how they came to be known as English people. So let's begin our video. England is an island, and an island means a place that is surrounded by water. The original inhabitants of this place were Celts. Okay, so these were Celtic people, and there were tribes like Britons who used to call themselves Britons and Gaels who were living there. These people were very simple and they were farmer like. They did not know how to defend themselves. These Celtic people followed paganism, which means they used to worship the gods of nature. There was no Christianity, no other religion till then. And I'm talking about the time before 500 AD, okay? These people were very simple. They were farmer like, you can see, and they do not know how to defend themselves. So when Romans invaded, when Angles and Jutes and Saxons, Vikings, other Germanic tribes invaded them, then they were defenseless. This is the map of England, the place on the left side of North Sea. This place where there is written Picts and Britons and Romano-Britons, this is the place we call England. And there is Ireland, there are Frank, Frisians, Saxons, Angles and Jutes. These Angles, Jutes and Saxons, these are Germanic tribes, okay, who attacked England later on. And the Western Roman Empire, this is the place from where the Romans had come. And Rome means Italy, Italy means Pope, and Christianity, everything happened here in Western Roman Empire, remember this. Romans came there during 55 BC and they remained there till 407 AD. But they went back to their country when their own country was under attack from Picts and Scots and other tribes maybe. This is the map of Europe. So this is the history of invasions. You can remember it by this particular name, CRAV and Craven. First, there were Celts, Celtic people who were the original inhabitants of the place. Second, there were Romans who came there around 43 BC or 55 BC. They attacked 2 or 3 times there, and after that they settled down there and also settled their armies there. They started living with these Britons and also provide them defense from other Germanic tribes. But when they left, there came Angles, Saxons and Jutes. They came around 407 AD and they remained there for a long time, for 500 years. They lived there. Then around 787 AD, Vikings, which is known to be a very barbarous tribe, they also attacked England and also occupied some of the places there. Then in 1066 AD, Normans, who were the French people, they came to England and claimed the throne of England. All these invasions had important impacts on the lives of English people, on English language, on England. First, there were Celtic people. Then Romans invaded that place around 55 BC. These Romans came and tried to Romanize these Britons, these tribal people, and they lived there with them. They provided them defense as well from other Germanic tribes, from other attacks. And three things that are very important to note is they brought Christianity with them, because we know that the origin of Christianity is in Rome. Second, they brought their language with them, which is Latin language, and with Latin language came the Roman alphabet, which became the alphabet of English language as well. So these three things happened here. Now coming to the characteristics of Anglo-Saxon age. The age starts from 450 AD till 1066 AD, and it is also called the Old English period. English which we read today, it was not like this. You will not be able to understand it, you will not be able to read it. It was Old English. The alphabets were very different, the spellings were very different, and you will not be able to read it properly. It was an age of war because I told you there were so many invasions happening, so many attacks were happening, and Vikings were there, Norsemen, Danes, Normans. Everybody wanted to occupy this piece of land. Then in 597 AD, a very important thing happened that I was talking a lot earlier, and it was the arrival of Christianity. Saint Augustine came to England and he converted King Ethelbert of Kent into Christianity in 597 AD. So remember this year is very important, and it also starts the history of Christianity in England. During this time, because of all these attacks and because these Germanic tribes also started living at this place, there became an amalgamation of different cultures. And England got its name England after England, which means the land of Angles, because they were the most powerful people among all the other tribes. And Britain after the original inhabitants, the original tribal people who were living there forever. So Britain after Britons. This age is important because it develops English language, and it happened with the Roman alphabet, which came with Roman invasion. So out of all these invasions, these two are very important. First is Roman invasion, and the second is your Anglo-Saxons and Jutes invasion. And then there is Norman conquest happening, which changed the course of history of England very much. So the first part is the characteristics of Anglo-Saxon age, and you will remember these things. First, it was an age of war. Second, you will remember that the arrival of Christianity happened in 597 AD. Then, because of these attacks, there were different cultures, and their impact we can see in their literature as well later on. And England got its name after England, and the English language started developing. Now coming to the second part of our video, that is characteristics of Anglo-Saxon literature. Sometimes in your exams, you can be asked that what are the characteristics of Anglo-Saxon literature, and then you will remember to mention all these points. Okay, first, the literature of this time was oral mainly, and especially oral poetry was at its peak. The oral poetry means the songs and ballads and refrains. Anglo-Saxon poetry focused on three themes. First, the theme was heroic. They mainly wrote war poetry, and sometimes they were elegiac as well. Elegiac means when we write a sad poem on someone's death or some dear one's loss, when we lose someone, someone who is very dear to us, a friend or a family member, and then we write a song about it, okay, commemorating the death of some loved one. The third theme was religious. After the arrival of Christianity, these religious biblical themes also entered the literature of England, and they also became the main subject of Anglo-Saxon poetry. Third point is different genres. There were three different genres that were specifically followed in Anglo-Saxon age. The first was epic poetry. Epic poetry means the poetry which is an epic. Epic means like we have Ramayana, Mahabharata in our country. Epic is a long narrative poem that focuses on a very important question of humankind, and which involves supernatural machinery, which involves gods and goddesses, and it is a long and very grand narrative. Then hagiography, which is the stories on the lives of saints and martyrs. Then chronicles. Chronicles is the documenting of important events in the history. Next was elegy. Elegy, I told you, it's a funeral song. Then riddles. Riddles is like paheli. Riddles are like, those confusing questions in which we ask a question to the other person, like puzzles. Okay, so riddles were also very famous at this time. The fourth point is Anglo-Saxon prose. It was not during 400 and 500 AD that people started writing in prose. It only began during 8th century, and the credit goes to King Alfred and Elfric, a clergy. This prose was Old English. It was not modern English that we read today. The fifth point is verse forms and literary techniques. And it is very important because there was some important thing happening in, in the literature of Anglo-Saxon age. The first was blank verse, use of blank verse. Blank verse is a type of meter that was used in poetry. It consists of 5 feet. 5 feet means 5 pairs of unstressed and stressed syllable. Okay, we are not going very deep into that. I will make you understand these meters and blank verse and other kind of meters in some other video. Second was alliteration. Alliteration is kind of a figure of speech in which a particular sound gets repeated. So it is a repetition of a consonant sound within a line of poetry. It is like Anupras Alankar in Hindi. Second is Shizyora. Shizyora is a pause in the middle of a line. When you just stop suddenly in middle of a line and you start it again. So that stop, that pause in the middle of a line is called Shizyora. Fourth thing is kennings. Kenning was a very important literary device at that time, and the writers used to make their writings interesting by using this. It is a kind of metaphor made of two words, a compound word you can say. So instead of saying sun, they would call it sky candle. Instead of saying body, they will call it bone house or life house. And they will use whale road for sea or swan road for sea. So these were the words which were used to create some kind of poetic effect, or maybe to meet the requirement of meter or feet in a poem. Next thing is irony. Irony is when you say something but you mean something else. Kind of a double meaning. Okay. And the next thing is a metaphor. Metaphor is again a figure of speech in which you compare two things, and the comparison would be very different. Only one or two things would be similar in those two things. For example, if I say my love is red, red rose, so my love is compared to a red rose without using any word like or as. So this would be a metaphor comparing two things which are totally different from each other. Okay, so that is a metaphor. Now coming to the third part, that is important works of Old English period. I told you that there was prose and there was poetry. In poetry, we had two poets whose names we know. First is Caedmon and the other is Cynewulf. Caedmon is the first English writer. Remember that. Caedmon is the first English writer. And Cynewulf, we get to know about Cynewulf very later. During 1840, we got to know his name because most of the things we do not know about Anglo-Saxon age. We have very less manuscripts left. In poetry, we have 4 manuscripts. First is Exeter book, which is very important. In this, you will find so many important works. Then there is Junius manuscript, Versailles book, and a Beowulf, which is an epic poem. So these 4 manuscripts we find from Anglo-Saxon age, and we have only this much information about the Old English period, the Old English poetry. Coming to the prose writers, we have 2 prose writers. First is Venerable Bede or BD and Alfred the Great, who was a king. So these were the 2 prose writers which are important. In prose, we have 2 works. BD's Ecclesiastical History of English People, and the second was Anglo-Saxon Chronicle by King Alfred. These 2 works are very important in prose. And in poetry, we have these works. Caedmon, who is the first English poet, Caedmon's hymn, which is the oldest surviving text in Old English. It is a short poem of 9 lines, and we find about Caedmon only in BD's Ecclesiastical History of English People. The second poet was Kinniwulf, and he has also written these four important works. First was Eileen, Juliana, The Fate of Apostles, and Christ's Second. This is also Apostles. Okay, so you will see that there is a lot of religious writing happening. There is one more thing that is called BD's deathbed poem, because it is said that when BD was dying, he wrote a very short poem at his deathbed. Another poem is The Dream of the Rood. It is a religious poem, and these poems are found in different books like Exeter book. Rood means a tree, and the experience of the tree when he is cut down and made a cross for criminals, and the rood becomes very hopeful of salvation, of getting salvation, when it is used for mounting Christ, when Christ was killed by people, for the sins of people. This root, this particular tree, the wood of the tree was used to make that cross. So it finds itself, very lucky and hopes to get salvation as well. The second is the lament of Dior, or Dior's lament. Sorry, there is some kind of editing that kind of happened. It is, or Dior's lament, and this name is also given by the later writers. None of these writers gave these particular titles to their works. It is a it is a poem of 42 alliterative lines. Again, alliteration, I told you, like Anupras Alankar, there is repetition of a consonant sound. Dior had a profound influence on J.R.R. Tolkien, the refrain in particular, which he himself translated as "Time has passed since then, this too can pass." And this line became very famous. There are so many articles written after this as well, which means this moment will too pass. The third work, which is very important and which is the first epic in English language, in Old English, is Beowulf. Beowulf is the largest epic poem that we have in English, in Old English. Beowulf was a brave warrior, he was a Swedish hero, and he fights with a monster. His name was Grendel, and he kills that monster. After 50 years, Grendel's mother comes back to take revenge, and Beowulf also kills the mother dragon, but also gets wounded, fatally wounded, and in the end, Beowulf also dies. So, in the end, there is an elegy kind of a thing as well, and it is set in Denmark. It is written in Old English. Remember all these things. Coming back to the Exeter book, anonymous authorship is there. We don't know the name of the authors. We just find a collection which is called Exeter book, in which we find all these manuscripts. The first is The Wanderer and The Seafarer. These two are the earliest elegies which we have in English literature. First is elegy on his lord's death, which is The Wanderer. Second is an elegy on the life of an old sailor. He remembers his old life, how he used to be in sea. It talks about the life on sea. The important thing about this elegy is that it is religious and also ends with Amin word. Third is The Wife's Lament. It is also a story of grief. A wife laments over his husband's exile who hasn't come yet. So it is also a very sad poem. Then there is another poem, The Ruin. There are 95 riddles, and there is a rhyming poem. Coming to the prose works, BD is an important writer whom we call Venerable Bede. Venerable means respected, and he wrote Ecclesiastical History of English People. He has written so many works, around 42 works he has produced, but we are only going to focus on Ecclesiastical History of English People, because the earliest record of English life or English history that we know till date, and which gives us information about Anglo-Saxon age. So it talks about the religious history of England. It talks about the arrival of Christianity, how the first king was Ethelbert was converted by Saint Augustine. It talks about all of that, and it also talks about the mythological legendary stories like King Arthur's name we find in BD's work only. Second is King Alfred the Great. He was the king of Wessex kingdom, and he translated so many works, but among all his works, we see Anglo-Saxon Chronicle as the most important one because it records history since Roman invasions. And there is Elfric, who was a clergyman. He also wrote religious works like Catholic homilies and colloquium. And these three prose works provide us with enough information about Anglo-Saxon age. Whatever we know about this age is through these works. So this is all about Anglo-Saxon age. We talked about the history of England. We know that, let us revise it first. We know that the original inhabitants were Celtic people. Then there came the Romans, then Angles, Jutes, and Saxons, then Vikings, and then Normans. And 1066 is the year of Norman conquest. At this time, Anglo-Saxon age ended and the rule of the French, the rule of the Normans started. So we are going to study the Norman period in the next video. Till then, bye bye, take care. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, subscribe and share. Thank you.